The SEC lost more quarterback talent than any conference in college football. Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 overall pick. Hendon Hooker, lightly regarded by some, one of the top quarterbacks in the country, posted one of the best, most impressive TD to pick ratios we've seen in years and years and years and years. Of course, Will Levis moves on to the NFL draft just outside of the first round, led Kentucky to a number of wins. Anthony Richardson didn't accomplish much in college, but of course the vast potential moving on as a first-round draft selection. All right, let's spin it ahead to 2023. Who's coming back and how did the quarterbacks rank in the best conference in college football? At number 14, we go to Vanderbilt. We typically go to Vanderbilt as the bottom team in the SEC in just about any ranking, but there is hope on the horizon. A.J. Swann had a nice season at 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions as just a freshman. Mike Wright was the guy that actually led Vandy to upset wins over Kentucky and Florida, but he's off to Mississippi State for some reason to back up Will Rogers. Then you've got also Ken Seals, who's been in the program for quite some time. The former starter is still around. Our number 14 team in the SEC quarterback rankings is Vandy, and most likely the starter, A.J. Swann. At number 13, we go to a crowded quarterback room where Brady Cook's been the starter for going on 2 seasons, but he's in a shaky position. He's fighting for his job after throwing for 14 touchdowns and 7 picks. He's had a shoulder injury that he's still recovering from. Good runner with over 600 yards on the ground, but he's facing stiff competition via transfer portal addition Jake Garcia from Miami, who's got the biggest arm in the room. Threw for 60% completion percentage and backing up Tyler Van Dyke. Looked lost at times, though. Suffered from lack of support in the wide receiver room there at Miami. Sam Horn, probably the most talented, may emerge as the ultimate winner of this as the 15th rated quarterback coming out of high school football in 2022. But he is rehabbing as well from a baseball injury. So Brady Cook, the most likely starter, put your money on him, although stiff competition again from Jake Garcia, and down the line, you've got Sam Horn. Our number 13 quarterback in the SEC is Brady Cook at Mizzou. Our number 12 quarterback in the SEC is at Alabama. That is not any kind of typo. That is the God-honest truth as we stand right here in May. Alabama's got the 12th best starting quarterback in the conference. Wow. After elite quarterback play from Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, and even before that, very steady, rock-solid play from the likes of A.J. McCarron and Blake Sims and Greg McElroy, Bama could be hurting at quarterback. They bring in Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame. He's a dual-threat guy, runs around, good athlete, won the job at Notre Dame in 22, but injured early, missed just about the entire season, came back for the bowl game and gave us just about everything in a 3-touchdown, 3-interception win against South Carolina in the Gator Bowl. Also at Alabama, of course, we saw Jalen Milroe, who came into the game in relief of Bryce Young last year against Arkansas. Excellent runner, played the full game and got the win, although not impressively against Texas A&M at home. Jalen Milroe does not look the part at all, unless he's improved considerably during the offseason as a thrower of the football. I know Alabama's going to go more run-heavy, rely on the defense, but they still have to be able to throw the ball downfield. Ty Simpson was a top recruit, but he has not distinguished himself. Keep in mind that you would expect among 3 fairly inexperienced players that there would be a quarterback battle that would loom into August. However, Bryce Young was good enough that despite only throwing 6 passes as a freshman, Nick Saban said, he's the starter. Don't need to see spring practice. He's the guy. At number 12 in the SEC quarterback rankings is Alabama, led by whether it be Jalen Milroe or Tyler Buckner. At number 11 in our SEC quarterback rankings, we check in Gainesville and former 5-star Graham Mertz. Marginal at Wisconsin, we know the deal. Again, the 5-star took over in 2020, put up 5 touchdown passes and only 1 incompletion, 20 of 21 in his college debut against Illinois, but then it went south from there, and he was marginal as a starter in 20, 21, and 22. Yes, you could look on the one side and say Graham Mertz really benefited from a strong running game that they always have at Wisconsin, and that he didn't have to shoulder the load. So that's to his advantage. So he probably wasn't even as good as his stats. On the other hand, when you run, you give few reps to the quarterback, usually 18 to 20 attempts for Graham Mertz at Wisconsin per game. So you don't allow him to develop. You also put your quarterback in a bind where he's constantly throwing on 3rd and long because you ran it on 1st down and you ran it on 2nd down. So Graham Mertz, new location, new coaching, maybe he's got a fresh start and maybe he takes advantage of that. Our number 11 quarterback in the SEC, Florida's Graham Mertz. We also go Big Ten South for our 10th best quarterback in the SEC entering 2023, and that is Peyton Thorne of Auburn. Led Michigan State to 11-2, top 10 finish and a Peach Bowl victory over Pitt in 2021, supported, of course, by one of the best running backs in college football, Kenneth Walker. However, this past season had little help outside of one Keon Coleman. He ran for his life all over the place last season with a depleted offensive line and not as many weapons as he enjoyed the previous season. Robbie Ashford's the backup most likely. This is still a quarterback competition, but we expect Peyton Thorne to emerge with 2 quality seasons at Michigan State, of course, the better of the 2 years ago when he had more support. He's mobile. He's a good runner. He's a good leader. He knows what he's doing. Good decision-making. Not a tremendously strong arm. Capable quarterback, and the 10th best in the SEC. The number 9 quarterback in the SEC is a wild card. He is Joe Milton via Michigan, now at Tennessee. Consider that Joe Milton completed less than 50% of his passes in high school, but was still a top recruit. Got the starting job at Michigan in 2020 and quickly lost it, and he was lost. He also showed himself to be lost in his opportunities at Tennessee in relief of Hendon Hooker early on. I point to the Ole Miss game in Knoxville where Tennessee had a shot to come back against one of the top 10 teams in the nation and pull out a victory. Milton replaced Hooker, who was injured, and he ended up running the ball out of bounds to end the game. Like, not aware of game situations, rocket of an arm, didn't know where it was going, inaccurate thrower. However, when he got his opportunities against, albeit meaningless games, meaningless pass attempts, in garbage time in 2022, he delivered. But then he got his shot in the Orange Bowl against Clemson. Clemson, not a vintage great Clemson defense, but still a really darn good defense in Clemson. And Joe Milton looked the part, had a huge game against the Tigers, threw 10 touchdowns and only 0 interceptions, much like Hendon Hooker, the great ratio. So he may have found a fit at Tennessee under Josh Heupel's offense. Our number 9 quarterback in the SEC is Joe Milton, Tennessee. Lane Kiffin has one loaded quarterback room, and he's got to choose one. Our choice at this point's got to go Spencer Sanders as the 8th best quarterback in the SEC. At Oklahoma State, he was often erratic, turnover prone, and didn't necessarily always get the job done. Was one of those guys that would make you jump for joy 1 minute and pull your hair out the next as a Cowboys fan. But, man, you can't disregard the accomplishments. 2 years ago, he led his team within inches of a Big 12 championship and also a college football playoff appearance. He's thrown for over 9,500 yards and totaled 85 touchdowns rushing and passing in his inconsistent career. But, again, he's played in a ton of big games. And when he's got it going, he can look like one of the best in the business. The decision-making and carelessness with the football, not the best. But he plays hurt, he leads the team, and he is a gamer. It's Spencer Sanders. But we've got to put the footnote there. He's not won the job. Jackson is the starting quarterback as of 2022 at Ole Miss. He threw for almost 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. Didn't necessarily light it up, but of course we know that they've got Quinshon Judkins and a fine running game with the Rebels. And also Walker Howard, the highest ceiling, the biggest arm, the most arm talent of the three, waiting in the wings with the least experience as a top 50 player coming out of high school. But for right now, we go number 8 quarterback in the SEC, Spencer Sanders, Ole Miss. We should already be used to seeing transfer quarterbacks all over these quarterback rankings, and here we get another one in Spencer Rattler of South Carolina. He was the starting quarterback at Oklahoma, a phenom coming out of high school, won the job at one of the top 5 to 10 teams in the country right out of the gate and turned in a pretty darn good 2020 season despite some early issues turning the ball over and blowing some games, as Oklahoma lost 2 in September and then ran the table. And then in 2021, he ran into the Texas defense and most notably ran into Caleb Williams, who took over, won the Texas game, and sent Spencer Rattler to the bench. That sent ultimately Spencer Rattler to South Carolina to turn in a pretty marginal season last year. They just were not good, South Carolina, on offense. Check out the game specifically against the likes of Arkansas and Missouri. But late in the season, the whole team came together, and Spencer Rattler was certainly in the middle of that, leading them to 63 points against Tennessee, 31 against Clemson, and then despite a loss, 38 on the board against Notre Dame. He came on at the end of last season with 139 points in those 3 closing games against quality opponents. Our number 7 quarterback in the SEC, Spencer Rattler, one of the most disappointing teams in college football, of course, Jimbo Fisher's Texas A&M Aggies. They've got not necessarily a new starting quarterback, but out of the gate to start the season, game number 1, yes, a new starting quarterback that they can start with on a fresh note here with Connor Weigman, the former 5-star, came in for the injured Haynes King and outplayed him and sent King to the bench for good and ran him off to Georgia Tech. Connor Weigman can play. A couple nice showings for Weigman down the stretch against SEC opponents. In a loss against Ole Miss, they're almost 400 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, and then the closer against LSU with Texas A&M seemingly with nothing to play for. Upset LSU as Weigman threw for a couple touchdowns and 67% completion percentage against the Tigers. Our number 6 quarterback in the SEC belongs to Texas A&M. He is Connor Weigman. On to the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC. 4 extremely experienced quarterbacks, especially for this day and age of college football. But the number 5 guy, no meaningful experience, but he plays with a big G on the side of the helmet, so that definitely means something. He is the starting quarterback most likely for the 2-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. Of course, we're talking about Carson Beck. He has waited his turn. He could have left, like most quarterbacks that are of the 4- and 5-star variety across the nation that take off. He did not. He hung in there behind Stetson Bennett. He looks more polished than everybody else in the room, including Brock Vandagriff, of course, and Gunnar Stockton. He looks the part. He looks like he's going to be the guy. He's in control of the offense. We saw it during the spring game, which was just a culmination of everything that we heard during the spring session of 15 practices for the Georgia Bulldogs. Carson Beck, most likely the starter for UGA, and trying to capture a 3rd national championship, and our number 5 quarterback in the SEC. Kentucky fans will remember both the good and bad that came with Will Levis, and it was played out during the offseason, certainly leading into the NFL draft, and then played out on NFL draft weekend. They probably will get themselves a little less drama in one Devin Leary from NC State, our number 4 quarterback in the SEC. Devin Leary had an outstanding, I mean phenomenal season in 2021 for NC State. 35 touchdowns, 5 picks, as he was ACC Offensive Player of the Year. Injured last season, had less supporting cast around him, will actually have better weapons in Kentucky. The Wildcats boast what might be the best wide receiver core they've had in the history of the school. Devin Leary can play, and now he's got a team around him to lead in the SEC. Our number 4 quarterback in the SEC, Kentucky's Devin Leary. The 2023 college football season will, of course, miss Mike Leach. He was an innovator, a genius, the architect of the new style of passing offense that has hit college football in the last 3 decades. And of course, he was always smart, witty, and amusing. And he certainly had the right guy to run his offense in Will Rogers. Go through the litany of quarterbacks that Mike Leach developed and displayed in his days at Texas Tech and Washington State, and Will Rogers might be the best fit to run this style of offense. Now, what will this offense look like minus Mike Leach and with Zach Arnett as a defensive coordinator at Mississippi State taking over as the head coach? And there be promises of more run-heavy. Certainly, you got to play to your strength, and that's Will Rogers, but he ran that attack of the air raid arguably better than anybody else. Will Rogers, if he just turns in a Will Rogers kind of season, 3,500 yards, something in that range, 30, 35 touchdowns. He is going to be one of the most prolific passers in the history of not just the SEC, but in the history of college football. He's going to finish in the top 5 or 6 in passing yards, attempts, completions, touchdowns. Will Rogers, the number 3 quarterback, not the most talented guy in the world, but makes the right throws, the right reads, knows what to do with the football, leads the team, and delivers on time and accurately. Will Rogers, the number 3 quarterback in the SEC. Our final 2 quarterbacks in this conference are very similar players, although one is slight of build and one is built like a tank. And I wrestled back and forth between these 2 players. And I'm going to go at number 2 with one KJ Jefferson of Arkansas. When he first hit the field for the Razorbacks, I thought, he is not a starting quarterback. He has so many rough edges, it's just not going to happen. He was a 47% passer over his first 70-plus attempts at Arkansas. Then he became the starting quarterback, and he worked and worked and worked and polished his game. And now, 68% completion percentage in 2022, 24 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. He ran for 9 touchdowns, 600 yards rushing, and when he gets into the open field, no defensive back wants to get in his way. He can knock people down in a hurry. He's fast, he's quick, he's a bulldozer when he needs to be, but more importantly, he's become a polished passer and leader of this football team. Our number 2 quarterback in the SEC is Arkansas's KJ Jefferson. So that leaves another similar player, as I mentioned, in one, Jaden Daniels, as the top player in the SEC at quarterback. Jaden Daniels, much like KJ Jefferson, a threat on the ground, but much more elusive, more of a glider, just runs like a deer, fast, and doesn't want a whole lot of contact, though. Slight of build. He burst onto the scene at Arizona State as a freshman and immediately showed that he could play, and this is one of the reasons why I put him at number 1, can play on the big stage and play in the fourth quarter and pull out games. He immediately did that at Arizona State, where he had more fourth quarter comebacks than any quarterback in college football. He's got a flair for the dramatic. He can turn it on. He can also be erratic, not know where he's throwing the football. He got off to a rough start with LSU last season, but then he got comfortable and started to take advantage of a top-flight wide receiver group. Excellent runner, and he really shined for the most part down the stretch against some really good SEC defenses. 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 69% completion percentage. Our number 1 quarterback in the SEC, Jaden Daniels, LSU. Please leave your comments down below. Lock it in here at the Voice of College Football. Give me a call during our next call-in show. The way you know when that is going to take place is to subscribe and slam that bell for the notifications to know when we go live right here at the Voice of College Football.